G'day and welcome to this hopefully short, presentation on the assignment task for the operational planning unit for the diploma. So that's BSBMGT515A. So if that's not the unit you're doing, please turn over now to the other station and get the Cert 4 one if that's the one you're doing. So this is the diploma unit. There's basically, I think there's 3 parts in this, is that right? Yes. There are 3 parts in this assignment. They're all quite substantial. Within part 1 though, there are 2 options. So option A is relating a report to the current operational plan that you have in your workplace. So whether you've got the remnants of one or a work schedule or something, that'll be enough for you to make comments about how it could actually be an operational plan even if it's not called that. So if you're in a workplace and you know your work schedules and there's targets and things like that, then option A is the one for you. If there is no plan at all, which would be a little bit surprising, but if there's no plan at all, then option B will be the one for you, and I'll discuss that in a moment. That's where you put your own plan together. So let's look at option A then. So review the current operational plan and associated budget for your work area against best practice for planning. So that's obviously looking at the notes, the things we've researched together, what other research and resources you've managed to acquire. And then I need you to prepare a report on its effectiveness, the effectiveness of the plan. And if possible, a copy of the plan that you're referring to would be handy to come in with the assignment. So as you review the plan, consider the following key elements. So there's a number of key elements, I'm just going to describe them separately, but they all need to be included in the report. Don't leave any out. And we're going to look at by analysing the comprehensiveness of the plan that you're reviewing. So in other words, is there anything missing or not? The accuracy of the estimates and the practicality. Does the plan actually reflect reality, or is it just something people have for the sake of having it? So, okay, let's go through the points we want you to consider within the report. The collection and analysis of information used as a basis for developing the operational plan. Its relevance, usefulness, method of collection, etc. So this is just a longhand way of saying, was there a SWOT, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis done? Or something similar, something that looked at the strengths within the business and the opportunities and threats outside of the business. You know, what information was this plan built on? Or was it just historical data from last year or the year before? And sometimes that's quite okay, but I'm asking you to comment about that when you put this report together. The relevance to your own organisation's strategic plan or mission. So is it in line with what this organisation is on about and where it wants to head? We need to see a linkage there. So the KPIs, they're both quantitative, so they're quantitative means things that you can measure numerically. You can usually report on percentages or numbers, what else would there be? Ratios, things like that. So that's quantitative, but also qualitative. So qualitative is where people's opinions might come in and perceptions of quality, things like that. Usually things that you have to ask people about rather than measure. So, and they relate, I guess, more to the effectiveness of the plan rather than the efficiency of the plan. So we'll try and look at both of those and see whether they truly measure the desired outcomes. So in particular, we want to look at the finance sort of side of things, how we're going with the budget, the quantity of the output, the quality of the output, the meeting of timelines, and lastly, and very importantly, the maintenance of safety standards are the KPIs that measure those things. The next point we want to consider is contingency planning, the quality of contingency plans. So obviously the most common thing, I guess, would be to have a pool of casual staff who are trained up and who can be brought in at short notice in case of a staff shortage, or a backup generator in case the power fails. They're sort of contingency plans that are fairly common. But just see what ones you can ascertain from within your operational plan. And if there isn't any, you can obviously have a pretty good go at writing a few things up that could be in there. The consultation processes, whether that was actually used to inform the planning process or was it just to tell people what was going on. We want to see true consultation when it comes to putting a plan together, so people feel like they own it, they belong with it. And lastly, whether the proposals were developed and presented for resource requirements using a variety of sources of information. Well, I managed to write things in a complicated way, don't know, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, it's just trying to say, okay, how do we decide what resources we're going to use? Do we just have the same supplier who's a relative of the boss's, or do we actually do a bit of research and make presentations to each other about the positives and negatives of a particular product or service, that sort of thing? So, and it may even be you've got preferred suppliers, they've got people that have met the criteria for quality and timelines and all that. And you have preferred suppliers, and that's pretty good. But are they reviewed to make sure we've still got the best of everything, I suppose, that can be? So if any of those key elements are missing from the plan, I need a bit of an outline as to what you believe should have been in there, what should have been addressed. And your report will obviously tell me your suggestions for improvement as you go. Okay, so that's option A. So option B then is to write your own plan, and it would be a smaller plan than a huge one for a big business. But so just think of something that's within your own team or department or even a community organisation you belong to, and just think, okay, what is it that I probably want to do one day, but I've never actually sat down and thought about it too much. This is your opportunity to write a bit of a plan about it. So it could be to do with researching stuff for a new market or a new product, or anything at all, or even an improvement to machines that we've got or something where you would need to do a bit of research, whatever it is. So that's the sort of plan that we want, something that suits you and would improve things for your organisation. And then the plan needs to contain at least 4 tasks. So if it was to do with the marketing plan, it might be to do with the research required of the market, the different mix of marketing tools that you could use, whether that's sponsorship or direct advertising or Facebook or whatever it is. Anyway, so we need at least 4 tasks within this thing that you're trying to do. And within each of those 4 tasks, we want to have at least 2 KPIs. So 2 KPIs that will measure, once again, the same as in option A, the things to do with finance, quality of output, quantity of output, timelines and safety. So I won't go through that whole list again, because the list that you're required to talk about as you put your plan together is exactly the same as the ones that are in option A, which is surprising, seeing we're meeting the same standard. But there's a little bit extra in that. I've provided a template. It's just a very basic template that you may use to try and put your plan together. You don't have to use it, you can use your own. But it requires a budget to be built up, and the budget format needs to show, if there's income, then show that. For most of us though, we're just budgeting to control cost. So we need to show the expected costs, and then have a column then for the actual costs of expenditure, and then a variance column. So something where we can show whether we're doing better or not doing quite as well as we thought, which allows you to make management decisions about what should happen. So that's basically it. To actually, in part A, is to review an operational plan or put one together, so that you'll feel confident that that's within your capabilities, should you be called on to do that, and maybe you already do. So that's part 1. Now part 2 is more about acquiring the resources we need for a plan, but it's not based on your plan now, it's just based in your own organisation. So firstly, we're looking for a summary of the recruitment and selection procedures. As we know, the human resources, us people, are the most important resources that any business can have. But we want to look at how efficient those procedures are, because we want to get people recruited who have all the right skills, selected because they're the best on merit, and then put into the job through an induction process, but that's going to come in a separate task in a minute. And that's what we want you to do, is just actually, does it take too long to get people? Are we getting people with the wrong actual skills? Or if it's in a government sector, we might have generic position descriptions, and they don't necessarily produce the best person for the job, because the job we got is not quite the same as the generic one. It might be, we need a more particular position description that tells you exactly what's required in the task and exactly what skills and knowledge are required. Anyway, so you can comment about that. So the induction side of it is the next task, and that's review the induction process and procedures actually followed by the last 3 employees who are recruited into your area. Well, if you haven't got 3, just the last couple then. But we want some qualitative and quantitative feedback from those people, so just their opinions of it to start with, but then what things did they actually do, and have a look at all the induction handbooks, the records and things like that, and maybe even talk to some of the people who are involved in the induction to get a pretty good feel for it. So the induction is a really important part of operational planning, isn't it? We need to have people who are properly trained and inducted so they can start performing as soon as possible, so that we don't lose time or lose money or lose production because we're waiting for them to be trained up. Or they're not safe because they haven't been properly trained in the safety side of things. So that's why it's pretty important. So the next part of this is in note any discrepancies between procedures and what actually occurred. In other words, do people do things different to the policies and procedures that are laid down? And just suggest some improvements to that induction process. And I'm looking for some recommendations about how it can be improved, and develop a strategy or two about how you would implement those recommendations. So it's fine to have the good ideas, but as a manager, you should be able to identify, okay, what's the best way for me to get those ideas up? Who do I need to convince? Who do I need to talk to? So they would be your strategies for communicating that improvement. Okay, so then the third task in here is analyse how physical resources and services are acquired in your work area. Consider how the amount and nature of resources required are determined, so that's the types and quantities of materials, the staff and skills required to complete tasks, etc. The effectiveness of policies, procedures and practices currently in place in relation to the above. So there might be purchasing policies or procurement policies, preferred supplier policies, that sort of stuff. And the ability to acquire resources that contribute to the achievements of the organisation's performance or operational planning. So they're the things we want to identify as resources or services that are needed by the organisation. But you're asked to then identify how information about resource requirements is gathered and recorded, how the information is reported and to whom, and how the information is acted on, including opportunities for consultation with frontline staff in relation to the resource requirements. So there needs to be a bit of consultation. Quite often the people on the floor know the best thing that they should be using, but at some level above them is stuck with some traditional way of some raw material, and they just keep getting the same thing. So a bit of consultation usually gets around that. How problems with resource acquisition are dealt with is the last point. So make recommendations about how each of these stages in the process could be improved with respect to how they work in practice, and a strategy again for implementing those recommendations. So it's fine to come up with the good ideas, but once again think about how would I convince someone, or how would I get those ideas up? So that's part 2. So part 3 now is once again just your organisation, nothing to do with your operational plan that you may have put together in part 1. So this is just within your own organisation. How is operational performance monitored? So that's operational performance in terms of finance, so performance against budget, the people's performance in their jobs, and the quality and the quantity of the outputs. How are those things actually monitored? So, now once again another short report with a few dot points we'd like you to look at. So these are the things to consider. How information about operational performance is gathered and recorded to assess progress towards achieving identified targets. So the process of gathering the information that's being monitored. How the information is reported and to whom. So does everyone get to see it, or only a few people? But who are the people that get it? The timeliness and relevance of the information. So do we get it after a month, or do we get it every week, or is it a daily sort of thing? Various businesses have different protocols for this. But also the relevance. Is it stuff that tells us something about how well we're going, or is it just stuff that we've always measured? The next point is the quality of analysis and interpretation. So once we've got the information, no matter who's got it, what sort of quality of analysis do they use? Is it just historical against how it went last year or the year before, whatever, or is there some more intelligent application of that information that's come through? And then how is unsatisfactory performance identified? So that's whether it's in the process or whether it's somebody's skill level or whatever it is. And then how is it rectified? And what support do people get for that? So that on the human resource side of things, there's a set performance management system usually, and you can talk about that. But then the other stuff is to do with the outputs and the processes, whether the supporting getting those improved or changed if they're not going so well. But also have a look at the policies and procedures that are in place and see whether they actually help or hinder this idea of trying to fix things up. Okay, the second last point within the short report then is the flexibility to vary operational plans and the negotiation process to achieve that. So is there a way to vary the plan when we see it's going off track? It might be anything to do with us, it might be outside influences, could be anything. So the flexibility to vary that, and then what negotiation is taking place if we needed to vary it. And then lastly in this short report is the manageability of systems, procedures and records associated with documenting performance in accordance with the organisation's requirements. It's a long sentence, isn't it? Anyway, it's basically saying how user-friendly is this system of recording data and reporting on operational performance. So there we go, so it's a fairly straightforward, I hope, look at operational performance and monitoring of it. Then there are, the next task is to make recommendations how each of these stages in the process could be improved and a strategy for implementing those recommendations again. Include the people or the person, who would be most appropriate to receive your recommendations. So it doesn't really be their name, it'd be their position title. So that's a short add-on to your previous analysis. And then the last task of the last part, number 3, review the current practice within your work area in relation to coaching and mentoring. Identify situations and opportunities where coaching and or mentoring can be used more effectively to increase productivity and safety. Include considerations of what positions or jobs may be involved and how these processes could be used more effectively. Document your findings together with strategies for implementing your recommendations. Sorry, ran out of breath there. So coaching and mentoring, often talked about in the same phrase, obviously, I just said it a number of times then, but they're different, aren't they? Coaching is actually on-the-job coaching, not training as such, but helping people develop their skills and you're actually working with them. Whereas mentoring is a step back. You're not actually working with someone, you're trying to develop their skills by suggesting ways they can improve their professional development or their skill level or their knowledge. But it's not first-hand. You normally talk about it outside of work or outside of the job at least. And you encourage people to improve and progress. So that's mentoring. And that's the end of those tasks. So looks like a really great assignment. I hope you enjoy it and I hope you submit it on time. Thanks a lot. See ya.